15 U.S. cities where rent just crashed. Landlords are panicking, so you know how everyone spent the last 3 years saying rent would never go down? How landlords were basically printing money while you ate ramen for dinner for nights a week because your one-bedroom apartment cost more than a car payment. Yeah, about that. Rent is crashing. Not in some theoretical future timeline where the economy collapses and we're all trading chickens for shelter. Right now, in real cities, with real landlords who are suddenly discovering what the word vacancy actually means. We're talking double-digit drops. 3 months of rent being thrown around like candy on Halloween. Landlords offering gift cards, waiving fees, and in one case I found literally running a sweepstakes where you could win a year of free rent just for touring an apartment. A sweepstakes for an apartment. And if you're sitting there thinking this sounds too good to be true, or that I'm about to sell you some course on real estate investing, you can relax. This is just what happens when you build 600,000 new apartment units in a single year. And then realize, oh wait, people can't actually afford infinite rent increases. Let's rewind for a second because this story is actually kind of beautiful in a deeply absurd way. From 2020 to 2022, rents went absolutely insane. We're talking 10, 15, sometimes 20% increases year over year in major cities. Landlords were convinced they'd found some kind of infinite money glitch. Remote work meant people could live anywhere, so they bid up prices in Austin, Boise, Phoenix. All these Sunbelt cities that used to be cheap suddenly weren't. At the same time, developers looked at those rent prices and thought, you know what we should do? Build out everything, all at once. So they did. According to recent data, 2024 delivered over 600,000 new multifamily apartment units to the market. That's the most new supply in a single year since 1986. Not a typo. 1986. That's the year Top Gun came out. That's how long it's been since we built this much rental housing. Now here's where it gets fun. All those apartments that started construction in 2021 and 2022 when rents were skyrocketing, they're all opening now. Right now. In a market where interest rates went from basically 0 to over 7%, where return to office mandates killed the remote work dream for a lot of people, and where inflation made everything else so expensive that people started having to choose between rent increases and, food. The result? Vacancy rates are now sitting at 7.3% nationally. That's the highest level recorded since tracking began in 2017. And in some cities, it's way worse. Denver hit 7.6%, the highest in 16 years. San Diego's sitting at 5.7%, the worst since 2009. And in certain neighborhoods like downtown San Diego, vacancy hit 10%, which in landlord terms is basically the apocalypse. So what do landlords do when they have empty units and mortgage payments due? They panic. And when landlords panic, rents fall. Let me walk you through 15 cities where this is happening right now. And I'm going to tell you exactly what the numbers look like and what it means. If you're thinking about moving or negotiating your lease. Number 15, Houston. Texas Houston never gets the hype that Austin does, which honestly might be why it's having a slightly softer landing. Rents are down about 1% year over year, which doesn't sound dramatic until you remember that. Houston rents were climbing 10% annually just 2 years ago. The city added thousands of new apartments, mostly in the suburbs. And now landlords are discovering that people don't actually want to pay $1.800 for a one-bedroom 30 minutes from downtown with no public transit. The interesting thing about Houston is it's always been a boom and bust town. Oil goes up, Houston booms. Oil goes down, Houston suffers. Right now, energy prices are all over the place, and the city's job market isn't adding positions like it used to. So people aren't flooding in the way they were. That means those brand new apartment buildings in places like the Woodlands are offering a month free just to get bodies in units. If you're in Houston and your lease is up for renewal, you've got leverage right now. Pull up listings for comparable units in your area, screenshot the concessions being offered, and have that conversation with your landlord. The worst they can say is no, but based on what I'm seeing, a lot of them are saying yes. Number 14, Washington, D.C. The nation's capital saw rents drop 2% year over year. which is almost unheard of for DC. This is a city where housing has been expensive forever because, the entire federal government works there. But something weird happened post-pandemic. A lot of federal workers went remote and decided they didn't actually want to pay the $500 for a one-bedroom when they could live in Baltimore or Richmond for half that. At the same time, developers kept building luxury apartments in neighborhoods like Navy Yard and the Wharf, betting that young professionals with government jobs would keep flooding in. Except they didn't, or at least not in the numbers developers were counting on. Now you've got these gorgeous buildings with rooftop pools and dog spas sitting at 15 or 20% vacancy, and landlords are quietly freaking out. The silver lining if you're a renter is that this is probably your best chance in a decade to negotiate in DC. The city's rental market has always been brutal, but right now there's actual inventory and landlords who will work with you. Number 13. San Antonio. Texas. San Antonio dropped 1.7% year over year, and over the past 3 years rents are down about 12% total. Now San Antonio was never as expensive as Austin, but it got caught up in the same migration wave. People kept hearing about how cheap Texas was, and San Antonio was the consolation prize if Austin was too expensive. The problem is San Antonio's job market never really supported the rent increases that happened during the boom. The city has a huge military presence with several bases, but military pay didn't go up 20% to match rent increases. Tourism is big there too, but those aren't high-paying jobs. So when rents peaked, a lot of people just left or moved in with roommates or family. Now you've got new construction all over the northwest side of the city, in places like the Dominion and Stone Oak, and vacancy rates are climbing. If you're looking at San Antonio as a cheaper alternative to Austin, this might actually be the right time. Rents are falling back to something closer to what local wages can support. Number 12. Raleigh, North Carolina. Raleigh is an interesting case because it's still growing. The Research Triangle is still attracting tech companies and pharmaceutical firms. But rents fell 0.3% year over year, and over 3 years they're down about 13%. Why? Because developers went absolutely crazy building apartments in and around downtown Raleigh, and the supply just overwhelmed demand. I talked to someone who lives there who said older Class C apartments, the kind that are like 20 or 30 years old, saw rents drop 7% year over year. Those are the buildings that used to be the affordable option, and now they're competing with brand new construction that's offering 2 months free rent. Raleigh's still a good city if you work in tech or healthcare, but the rental market has completely flipped from a landlord's market to a renter's market in the span of about 18 months. That's how fast this can change. Number 11. Atlanta, Georgia. Atlanta's down about 11% over the past 3 years, which is wild for a major metro that's been growing consistently for decades. What happened is Atlanta has always been a sprawling city with cheap land. So when developers wanted to build, they could build a lot. And they did. Suburban areas like Sandy Springs, Alpharetta, and even further out saw massive apartment complexes go up. The issue is a lot of that development was betting on continued population growth and rising rents. And both of those trends have slowed way down. Atlanta's still growing, but not at the pace it was, and people are more price sensitive now. So you've got buildings offering concessions, waiving deposits, throwing in free parking, whatever it takes to fill units. If you're in Atlanta and you've been priced out of the city core, this is your moment. Suburban Atlanta has inventory everywhere, and landlords are motivated. Number 10. Colorado Springs. Colorado Springs is down 15% over the past 3 years, which is one of the steeper drops on this list. Colorado Springs was always the affordable alternative to Denver, and during the pandemic it became even more popular as remote workers moved there for the mountains and the lower cost of living. But then construction caught up, and now the city has way more apartments than it has people moving in. The military presence at Fort Carson provides some stability, but military members aren't going to pay $1,800 for a 2-bedroom when the BA doesn't cover it. So rents have been falling steadily. This is a good market for renters right now, especially if you want to be near outdoor recreation without paying Denver or Boulder prices. Just know that the job market in Colorado Springs is limited if you're not in the military or working remotely. Number 9. San Diego. California's San Diego rents drop 1.4% year over year, which might not sound like much until you realize this is one of the most expensive rental markets in the country. The median rent is still over $2,000 a month, but it's falling. And in some neighborhoods like downtown San Diego, vacancy hit 10%. Here's the problem with San Diego. It's expensive to build there, it's expensive to live there, and wages haven't kept up with housing costs for years. The city has a huge biotech and military presence, but unless you're working in one of those sectors, it's tough to afford rent. Developers build a ton of luxury apartments downtown betting on high-earning professionals, and now those units are sitting empty because even people with good jobs are balking at $3,000 for a one-bedroom. San Diego landlords are now offering concessions, and some are even negotiating rent down on renewals, which never used to happen. If you're in San Diego and your lease is coming up, this is the time to push back. Number 8. Minneapolis. Minneapolis saw rents drop over 11%, which is significant. The city adopted some pretty aggressive pro-housing policies, including zoning reforms that made it easier to build denser housing. That's great for long-term affordability, but in the short term it means a surge of new supply hit the market all at once. Minneapolis is a good example of what happens when you actually try to address housing supply. Instead of just letting prices run wild, rents are falling, vacancy is up, and renters have options. The downside is that Minneapolis winters are brutal, so you're trading lower rent for having to deal with negative 20-degree wind chills. That's a personal choice you have to make. Number 7. Fort Myers. Florida Fort Myers is down 19% over the past 3 years, which is one of the biggest drops in the country. Fort Myers got absolutely hammered by Hurricane Ian in 2022, and while the city has been rebuilding, a lot of people decided they didn't want to stick around for the next hurricane. Insurance companies started pulling out of Florida, and suddenly people realized that living in a hurricane zone might not be the retirement paradise they thought it was. Add to that a ton of new construction that was already in the pipeline before the hurricane. And now Fort Myers has way more inventory than demand. Landlords are desperate to fill units, and some are offering deals that would have been unthinkable 3 years ago. If you're considering Fort Myers, just know that you're trading low rent for hurricane risk and insurance headaches. That's not a trade everyone should make. Number 6. Phoenix, Arizona. Phoenix is down 1.6% year over year, and over 3 years rents are down about 14%. Phoenix was one of the hottest markets during the pandemic. Everyone wanted to move to Arizona for the warm weather and the relatively low cost of living. Compared to California, developers responded by building like crazy. The problem is Phoenix summers are getting hotter, water scarcity is becoming a real issue, and a lot of the jobs that brought people there, like remote work positions, have either dried up or gone back to office. So now Phoenix has thousands of new apartments and not enough people to fill them. I've seen Phoenix apartments offering 2 months free rent, which is basically unheard of for a market that was on fire just 2 years ago. If you can handle 115-degree summers and the existential dread of wondering whether the water supply will hold out, Phoenix is cheap right now. Number 5. Aurora. Colorado. Aurora is Denver's often overlooked neighbor, and rents are down 1.4% year over year. Aurora never had the same appeal as Denver proper, but during the housing boom, people got pushed there because it was more affordable. Now that Denver rents are falling too, Aurora is getting squeezed from both sides. The city has been trying to revitalize its downtown and attract more businesses, but progress has been slow. Meanwhile, new apartment buildings keep opening, and landlords are competing hard for tenants. If you work in Denver but want cheaper rent, Aurora might be worth looking at. Just know that you're trading convenience for cost. Number 4. Boise, Idaho. Boise was the poster child for pandemic migration insanity. Everyone and their mother wanted to move to Boise in 2020 and 2021. It was going to be the next Austin. Remote workers were going to transform it into a tech hub with mountains and rivers and a low cost of living. Except that didn't happen. Rents shot up so fast that they priced out locals, And then when return to office mandates came down, a lot of those remote workers either left or realized they couldn't actually afford Boise anymore. Developers build aggressively, betting on continued growth. And now Boise is sitting on a pile of empty apartments. Rent data shows Boise cooling significantly, though specific year-over-year numbers vary by source. What's clear is the boom is over. Boise is still a nice place to live if you like outdoor recreation. But the idea that it's some kind of affordable paradise is gone. It's just another mid-sized city trying to figure out what happens after a speculative bubble pops. Number 3. Denver, Colorado. Denver is down 5.4% year-over-year, with some apartment types down closer to 7%. Vacancy hit 7.6%, the highest in 16 years. Let that sink in. Denver, one of the most desirable cities in the country, has more empty apartments than it's had since 2010. What makes Denver fascinating is that 68% of rentals are offering concessions right now. That's the highest rate in the entire nation. We're talking 3 months free rent in some buildings. Gift cards. Raffles where you can win a year of free rent. Landlords are doing everything short of washing your car every week to get you to sign a lease. The problem is Denver built an absolutely insane amount of housing over the past few years. Something like 125,000 units in the last decade, with a huge chunk of it coming online in 2024 and 2025. At the same time, Colorado's migration trends basically flatlined. People aren't moving to Denver at the rate they used to, and some are actually leaving. If you're in Denver right now, you have more leverage than you've had in over a decade. This is the time to negotiate, shop around, and make landlords compete for you. It's a renter's market in a way it hasn't been since before the pandemic. Number 2. Sarasota. Florida Sarasota is the most traumatic crash on this list. Rents collapsed 40.67% from $3,000 to $190 in January 2024 to $1,886 by January 2025. That's not a correction. That's a free fall. What happened? Sarasota adopted some really aggressive pro-housing policies, including zoning deregulation and a $40 million investment in affordable housing. At the same time, the Florida insurance crisis hit. Hurricanes kept coming, and a lot of the retirees and remote workers who moved there during the pandemic started having second thoughts. Sarasota was also overbuilt. Developers were banking on endless demand from people fleeing the Northeast. And when that demand didn't materialize the way they expected, prices had nowhere to go but down. Sarasota is now genuinely affordable again, at least by Florida's standards. The catch is you're dealing with all the same issues as the rest of Florida, including hurricane risk, insurance problems, and the general chaos of living in a state where the climate is actively trying to kill you. If you can handle that, Sarasota is worth looking at. Number 1. Austin. Texas Austin has to be number 1 because it was the symbol of everything that went wrong with pandemic-era housing markets. Austin became the poster child for tech migration, for remote work, for rising rents, and housing unaffordability. Rents are down 8.8% year-over-year as of mid-2025, with the median asking rent at $1,385. That's the lowest it's been since February 2021. Over the past 3 years, rents are down a staggering 21%. Austin built more housing per capita than almost any other major city in the country. The city approved 64.5 units per 10,000 people, the highest rate nationwide. That's great for housing supply, but in the short term it created a massive oversupply situation. Tech layoffs didn't help. A lot of the companies that relocated to Austin or went fully remote ended up doing layoffs in 2023 and 2024, and suddenly Austin wasn't the hot destination it used to be. Return to office mandates pulled people back to San Francisco and Seattle, and locals who got priced out in 2020 and 2021 are now looking at rent prices and realizing they can move back. Austin landlords are absolutely panicking right now. You can find buildings offering 8 weeks free rent. Some are waiving application fees, deposits, everything. It's a complete role reversal from 3 years ago when landlords could charge whatever they wanted and still have a line of applicants out the door. If you're in Austin or thinking about moving there, this is your window. Rents are probably going to stabilize at some point, but right now you've got options and leverage you won't have forever. So what does all this mean in the bigger picture? First, it means the apartment construction boom of 2024 and 2025 is officially over. Developers are pulling back hard because they're looking at vacancy rates and falling rents, and realizing they can't make the math work anymore, especially with higher interest rates. According to industry data, 2024 delivered over 600,000 units, 2025 dropped to under 500,000, and 2026 is expected to be even lower. Second, it means landlords no longer have infinite pricing power. For years, they've been able to raise rents 5, 10, even 15% annually because they could. The market let them. Now the market is saying no, and landlords are discovering what happens when supply catches up with demand. Third, this is what pro-housing policy looks like when it actually works. Cities like Austin, Minneapolis, and Sarasota that made it easier to build housing are now seeing rents fall because there's actually inventory. That's not a bug. That's the feature. Housing gets more affordable when you build more of it. Wild concept, I know. Here's what you need to know if you're a renter right now. If your lease is up for renewal in any of these 15 cities, do not just accept whatever increase your landlord sends you. Do your research. Pull up listings in your area. Look at what concessions other buildings are offering. Screenshot everything. Then sit down with your landlord and have a real conversation about what the market actually looks like. Landlords are betting that you won't do this. They're betting you'll just accept a rent increase because you don't want the hassle of moving. But right now, in these markets, you have leverage. Vacancy is expensive. Turnover is expensive. A good tenant who pays on time is valuable, and most landlords would rather keep you at a slightly lower rent than risk having the unit sit empty for 2 months while they search for someone new. If you're thinking about moving to one of these cities, this is probably the best opportunity you're going to get in years. Rents are falling, concessions are everywhere, and landlords are motivated. Just make sure you're moving for the right reasons. Don't move to Phoenix because rent is cheap if you hate heat. Don't move to Denver if you can't handle altitude and snow. The low rent won't be worth it if you're miserable. And if you're in a city that's not on this list, don't assume this doesn't apply to you. Rental markets move in cycles, and what's happening in Austin and Denver and Phoenix today could happen in your city in a year or two. The more you understand how these markets work, the better decisions you can make about where to live and how much to pay. The apartment boom is officially over, and we're living through the aftermath. Landlords who thought they could raise rents forever are discovering that markets actually do have limits. Developers who build expecting infinite growth are staring at empty buildings wondering what went wrong. And renters, for the first time in years, actually have some power in the negotiation. This won't last forever. Construction is already slowing down, and at some point supply and demand will rebalance. But right now, in these 15 cities, rents are falling and landlords are panicking. If you're in one of these markets, use that to your advantage. So here's my question for you. If you're renting in one of these cities, are you planning to negotiate your next lease? Or are you just going to accept whatever your landlord offers? Drop a comment and let me know. And if you know someone who's getting crushed by rent right now, send them this video. They need to know this is happening. Subscribe if you want more real estate intelligence that actually tells you what's going on, instead of just cheerleading for the housing market. I'll see you in the next one.